So is pet insurance in Australia actually worth it? For over 3 decades, I have helped everyday Australians make wise money decisions. And this is probably one of the most emotional money decisions there is, because it's not just about money, it's about your furry family member. Now, if you've got a cat or a dog, you've probably had one of those moments where you thought, what if something happens and I end up with a $5,000 vet bill? What would I do? Well, by the end of this video, you will know exactly how pet insurance in Australia works. You will know the pros and the cons of pet insurance. You will know the things you really need to look out for. You will also know the alternatives to taking on pet insurance. And at the end of this video, I will share with you a simple way to decide what is right for you. Now, if after watching this video you would like a simple one-page checklist to compare the policies and avoid the traps, then please check out the link in the description below. So before we have a look at the pros and cons, I want to provide you with some perspective on what pet insurance really is. What is it that I'm buying when I have pet insurance? Because many people get this wrong and it colors their view on whether or not pet insurance is right for them. So the first thing to understand is that when you're buying pet insurance, it's not about making ownership of your pet cheaper. What it is about is protecting you from those really big, ugly, unexpected bills. So the question we really need to be asking ourselves when it comes to pet insurance isn't, will I make my money back every year? But rather, the question should be, if something were to happen, could I handle it without panic, without having to take on a whole bunch of debt, and without having to make a heartbreaking decision? That's the lens for this entire video. So let's start by having a look at the 3 different types of pet insurance policies available in Australia right now. I'm going to go through these in more detail, but let's just list them first. We've got accident only, we've got accident plus illness, and then we've got accident plus illness plus routine extras. So the first type of policy is the accident policy, and this is exactly as it sounds. It is purely for accidents. This is Fido doing something dumb at the park, and it covers things like broken bones and fractures, bite wounds, or cuts that need stitches, hits by a car or falls, foreign object injuries, emergency surgery from an accident, x-ray scans and medicines that relate to that accident. So again, it's very much about accidents, and typically it won't help with illnesses, and that is why this policy is the cheapest policy. So please don't make the mistake of getting an accident only policy and assuming that it's going to cover you for other things. It doesn't. So that is the accident only policy. The second type of pet insurance is the accident and illness policy. Now, this is a much more comprehensive insurance because not only does it cover you for all the accidents which we just discussed, but it also covers you for a range, or quite a wide range of medical conditions that may show up after your pet has been insured. So this includes things like gastro episodes of vomiting and diarrhea, ear infections, skin infections, allergies, urinary tract infections, pancreatitis, diabetes, cancers, diagnostics like blood tests, ultrasounds, sometimes CT and MRI, surgery, hospitalization for covered illnesses, and prescription medications for covered conditions. So quite a comprehensive list there of things that your pet may or may not experience. But please understand that every policy is different and they cover different things. So make sure you're aware of what is covered before you sign on the dotted line. And the third type of cover is the accident, illness, and routine extras. This is easily the most expensive type of pet insurance because as well as covering you for the accidents, as well as covering you for the medical conditions, it also covers you for some of the everyday vet bills. So things like your annual checkups, your vaccinations, treatments for flea, ticks, worming, desexing, microchipping, teeth cleaning, those sorts of things. Now, the issue with this type of policy, you've got to make sure you do the maths, is that there are tight caps often on how much you can claim each year. So you really need to weigh up whether or not paying the extra in premiums makes sense. Okay, so they're the 3 types of policies available in Australia. Let's now have a look at the pros for taking on pet insurance. The first and most obvious is that it's to protect you from really big, ugly vet bills. I'm sure we've all heard horror stories or experienced horror stories ourselves where vet bills have ended up being $5,000, $7,000, $10,000 or more, and people have taken really big financial hits. The second one is peace of mind. Just knowing you've got it there helps you enjoy owning a pet that little bit more, knowing that if something were to happen, it doesn't matter. You've got those big bills covered. The third one is that it can prevent money-driven decisions. I'm sure we've all heard of people who have had, unfortunately, to put their pets down simply because they could not afford the surgery, the life-saving surgery or treatment that their particular pet required. Having the insurance can ensure that your pet can get the treatment that it requires and that you don't have to make a decision based on your financial situation. Number 4 is it's best value when you've got a young puppy with no issues. There are no pre-existing conditions. Getting the insurance early can mean you get good coverage at a good price so that they're covered throughout their life. And then number 4 is that for some households who budgeting isn't really a strong point, just having pet insurance where it's just taken out of their bank account every month means that it is a form of savings, if you like, forced savings, so that when something big occurs, again, the money is there to pay for it. So they're the pros. Let's now have a look at the cons and why many people often end up rage quitting pet insurance because their experience wasn't a good one. So the first con is the exclusions. Now this could be something that your pet already has before you take on the insurance, so it gets excluded, or it could be even something that comes up during the waiting period. So there's often waiting periods that you have to go like 6 months or 12 months before you'll be covered for something. Often if something arises during that time, you may never get cover for it. The second con is waiting periods. Most policies have waiting periods on illnesses and even longer waiting periods on things like joint and ligament issues. So if you sign up today because your dog has a limp, it's unlikely that you'll be covered for at least 6 to 12 months. And the third con is that most policies include an excess and co-payment percentage, which means that even if you are covered, you could still find yourself out of pocket hundreds and potentially even thousands of dollars, depending on the size of the bill. The fourth con are the caps and sub-limits. There are very often annual limits to what you can claim, and there's often limits per condition. So even though you might be covered, you may well find that you're covered for less than you actually expect. And the fifth con is that premiums will rise. Just as it does with human life insurance, the older that we get, the more of a risk we become to the insurance companies, and therefore the more the premiums go up. And this will also be impacted by the breed of dog or cat that you own. It'll also be impacted by your claims history. So just understand that even though it might be reasonable when you've got a puppy, as your dog gets older or as your cat gets older, those premiums will get more and more expensive. And the sixth con, which we've touched on already, is that the routine extras rarely make financial sense. What you can actually claim rarely adds up to what you've paid in premiums. So please just make sure you're reading the policy and you're doing the maths. So those are the pros and cons. Let's now have a look at what I call the watch out list. These are the 5 things that I would encourage you to check before you sign anything. The first of these being the pre-existing conditions. What does the policy consider a pre-existing condition? You need to make sure you're aware of this so that you don't find yourself a year or 2 down the track wanting to claim and realizing you're not actually covered. Second one is waiting periods. How long do you need to wait before you can claim on any particular illness or injury? Third one is the excess and copay. When we sign up for car insurance, we often have the choice of taking a higher excess and a lower premium, or a lower excess and higher premiums. It's the same with pet insurance, except they also include what's called a copay. And what this means is that if you take, say, a higher excess, then your copay will be a bit lower. So this might be the insurance company says, well, if you take the highest excess option, you only have to pay 10% of the rest of the bill and we'll pay 90% of it. If you pay a lower excess, then they might say, okay, well, you pay for 50% of the bill and we'll pay for 50% of the bill. It's really important that you understand what those ratios are for you before you sign the cover. Then the fourth one is the annual limit and condition limit. So there's an annual amount that they will cover you for, worst case scenario, but there's also sub-limits to that based on the different conditions. So for instance, what you're covered for with pancreatitis might be different to what you're covered for cancer. So again, just make sure what those limits are. And then the last one is, please be aware of what's excluded or what isn't included in your policy. I think sometimes we can assume that things are covered and then find out they're not. So just make sure you're very clear on what has been excluded from the policy. Okay, so I hope this has been helpful so far. If it has, can I please encourage you to click the like button, because that helps my channel reach more families, to help more people. And please subscribe, because every week I release more videos with practical, no fluff money strategies to help you and your family thrive financially. So please click the like and click subscribe. So right now you might be thinking, gee, I don't know if pet insurance really is for me, but what are my alternatives? Well, let me share with you 3 very simple alternatives that I use with my clients all the time. And the first of these is simply to self-insure, to have a budget set up so that every month you're putting aside money into a vet's account, if you like, so that when the bills turn up, whether it's a routine checkups or something a little bit more serious, you actually have the money sitting there ready to go. Option B is what I call the hybrid approach, and this is particularly useful for people with younger pets, because when they're young, we're not so worried about them getting some kind of illness, but we are worried about them doing something stupid to themselves. So having pet insurance, accident-only pet insurance, can be really useful to cover you for those kinds of things, the broken bones, the cuts, the falls, and so on. We can be covered by the pet insurance while they're young, and we can then have a fund on the side that we're gradually building money in to cover them for their day-to-day vet stuff, but also for illnesses later in life. So having that hybrid approach can be very, very useful when your pets are young. And option C is simply to have a bigger emergency fund or a bigger cash reserve. As a financial coach, I take all of my clients through a financial roadmap. Step 5 in that financial roadmap is to have a cash reserve of at least 3 to 6 months worth of your household expenses, so that when the unexpected turns up, when unexpected life events or unexpected expenses turn up, you have the money sitting there ready to go. And what that means is that a big expense like a vet bill becomes a inconvenience rather than a crisis. Now, regardless of which of these 3 options you might choose to self-insure, the important thing is that you have a plan before the emergency hits. Okay, so what I want to do now is take you through a very simple decision-making process to help you decide whether or not pet insurance is for you. So step 1 in this process is to consider, if you were faced with a $3,000 to $8,000 vet bill in the next few months, could you handle it? What would you do? Could you handle it without a whole lot of stress, without needing to take on debt? Could you actually cover it at all? If the answer is no to any of these, then you should probably consider taking on some form of pet insurance. And step number 2 is simply to consider how old your pet is and do they already have some medical issues. Because if they do, it's likely there's going to be a whole bunch of exclusions. And if there's exclusions, the health insurance could be of limited value. And you're probably going to be better off just building yourself a pet fund. Step 3 is just to consider why you're getting the pet insurance in the first place. As we discussed a little bit earlier, if you're getting it because you'd like to be able to cover the annual checkups and vaccinations and those sort of things, then you're probably going to be really disappointed in terms of what you actually get back in terms of value for money. However, If you're using it as a protection against catastrophe, something really expensive going wrong with your pet, then pet insurance is probably a wise move. And step number 4 is to consider your money personality. If you know you're not great with money and you're unlikely to put money aside for that rainy day, then having pet insurance is a great way to ensure that you have got some money, you have got some cover should something happen. However, if you're disciplined and you're good at budgeting, then self-insuring, putting money aside into a pet's jar every month can be a great way to ensure you've got the money when you need it. And the last step in this process is what I call the regret test. And you've got to consider, which would you regret more? Paying these premiums consistently and not claiming a whole lot back, or not paying the premiums and then getting hit with a really big vet bill? If you can answer that, then you've probably got your answer. Thank you so much for watching this video. I genuinely hope that it's been helpful and it's given you some clarity around whether or not health insurance is something that you should be considering. And if you'd like a copy of my pet insurance checklist, please click on the link in the description below. And please remember, it is the little habits and strategies that you put in place today that can literally make $1 million difference to your future. Take care, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.